I guess it's time to start then. uh, Hi all, my name is Alisa and thanks for joining. And as you probably know already, the topic of this presentation is falling in and out of love with a language. And I guess it's time to explain what to expect from this. So I'll start by telling you a bit about myself um, and explain how I joined the language learning community and why am I here in general. Then I'll go through a few possible reasons why someone might lose interest in a language or stop enjoying it. I'll make a few comments on the education system, more on the Irish one because I live in Ireland, but I think the issues of it are universal everywhere. I will share my personal story. In fact, a lot of them. And it's not because I love talking about myself, but it's because that when I was doing research on the topic, I suddenly realized that most of the problems that people face have happened to me at some point. So maybe my personal example would explain them better. I will also run through a few methods to return the love and interest for a language. And then at the end, we'll have time for some questions. So, as I said already, my name is Alisa. I'm in second year in university studying global business and French in DCU in Dublin. And I am a content creator at the International Polyglot Youth Project, which you may have heard about. It's one of the partners of the conference. And the point of this project is to make language learning accessible for everyone, aimed at young people more. And it offers free language classes, so you could volunteer to teach a language there, or you could sign up as a learner. I'm also a study grammar, which this is probably the first time I've actually used this words to describe myself, because usually I say that, oh yes, I have a blog on Instagram, yeah, nothing big, nothing much, but it's time to face the fact that it is much for me, and it is a big part of my life at this stage. And the account is called Alisa Study Life, in which I started off as a study account for the Leaving Cert, which in Ireland is the name of the final school exam. And I started it when I was in final year of school in October 2019, and all was going well. But then when I graduated from school, I came to the realization that for now, the name study for LC 2020 is not relevant anymore because exams got canceled because of COVID. I've graduated from school and 2020 was, more than halfway over. So I've changed it to become more of a language account, and I share language resources, different apps, different study tips, study content in general, and kind of my life. Because apparently people are interested in that. I won't complain. And finally, and most importantly, I am a language lover, which is why I'm here. I grew up bilingual in English and Russian, and I'm upper intermediate in French, lower intermediate in Irish, and elementary in Italian, and a full beginner in Greek. At two points in life, actually, I tried learning German, but both times I was kicked out of the class for being too young, because first time I was 12, second time I was 15. And for some reason, learning German is 18 plus, according to the people organizing the class. So that didn't really work out. I've officially joined the language learning community in March 2019. Because before that, yes, I had this experience with German, I learning French in school, and Irish as well. But I never really thought this community exists as such. And then in March 2019, I've attended a language conference, which was my first language event. And I thought that, wow, there is a community of like-minded people. And that was the moment that it all clicked, and I started associating myself with them. So at one point, people started associating learning languages with me, which I can't complain about because it's a nice association. So this is why I'm here, pretty much. And I guess it's time to get into the fun parts. So some of the reasons why somebody could fall out of love or lose interest in a language. The first one, and I think it's quite important, is the lack of exposure to interesting content. Because you're learning a language, maybe you're just using a textbook or one specific resource, and it may be fine at first, but then at one moment you realize that it's just getting very boring. You've nothing else to use. You don't really interact with content and media that native speakers interact with. You don't really know what's available as such. And it's just, the language stops feeling interesting, and you just don't know what to do with it. And this links with my next point of no good resources, because I know that for some languages, it's easier to find resources than for others. For example, even from my ones, there is a lot of stuff available for French and Italian. But with Greek, for example, when I was learning it, I had a textbook, probably one YouTube channel, and one or two Instagram accounts. And other than that, I couldn't really find much. And the textbook that I had was also quite outdated in the vocabulary and the points that it made. So this lack of resources could really make someone feel like the language is not interesting just because there's no good stuff available. Perhaps you have nobody to talk to, which we all know it's important when you learn a language, because humans love interacting, or at least most of them do. And if you don't know anyone who's a native speaker of your target language, or even other people learning it, you could feel that if I don't have a reason or a way of using the language, then why am I even learning it? And the moment questions like that are asked is very dangerous, because if you get to the point of why am I even doing this, there's no point, chances are it's not going well, and something probably has to be changed about it. A very common problem that language learners face is the intermediate plateau. And in case you don't know, it's basically when you're stuck at intermediate level. So when you're a beginner, your progress is very visible, because even in the first few weeks of learning a language from scratch, you could see how much you progress, because, for example, a week ago, I couldn't even say hello, and now I could ask how someone's doing, describe how I look or something. It's very, very easy to measure. But once you get intermediate, you understand most grammar points. Like, yeah, you could conjugate a lot of verb tenses, you can structure sentences, your knowledge of vocabulary is good enough to have a decent conversation on a large amount of topics. So all of a sudden, your progress feels like it's not moving, just because intermediate progress is slower. And if you're stuck in the intermediate stage for a very long time, it could be very demotivating. And you could start having thoughts like, if as if you're not advancing, as if there's no point in continuing, that you're not good at that language, that you'll never reach a fluent level, that you'll never speak. And this could also lead to our next problem, which is burnout. And burnout is something that I see a lot of people in the language learning community talk about. And on one hand, it's nice to know that, you're not the only person facing those types of problems. But on another hand, burnout is not a nice feeling. Let's say you start learning a language. You have a large variety of resources. You have lots of enthusiasm. You decide that you're going to do this language 1 hour every day without taking any days off. You have your Duolingo streaks going. You've everything sorted, and you're enjoying it at first. But then as time goes on, and it's different for everyone, of course, you could feel like you're just not motivated anymore, that you're just sick of that language. I will share my burnout story a little bit later, but it's a condition that's very hard to get out of, but it's possible. And finally, the last reason was actually one that my friends told me about when we were discussing the topic, and a language could just stop being relevant. And by that, my friend meant that, for example, you started studying a language because you want to study in a different country, or you want to move there for work, or you want to go on holidays there, and you decided that, okay, I'm going to learn this language up to whatever level you want before going. And this is your main reason for learning it, your main reason for enjoying it, because you're looking forward to the journey, and all is going well until your plans change. And when your plans change, let's say you choose a university course in another country. So instead of learning French, you all of a sudden decide that, oh, it's better to learn Swedish because I'm going to Stockholm instead. Or if your holiday to the country gets cancelled because of COVID, which unfortunately happened to me in December with Italy, you could, when the main reason for which you're learning a language gets taken away from you, you could just lose interest, because once again, you'll ask yourself the question, then what's the point in doing this if it's not relevant, if I don't need it anymore? And another thing that I think is worth a mention is the education system. So schools have, in my opinion, very questionable approaches to teaching, because grammar is valued more than vocabulary or even pronunciation, speaking practice, or anything you need to communicate. I'm not saying grammar is not important though, because of course you need to know how to structure your sentences, how to use the present, past, and future, and all of that. But just focusing on grammar, you can find that you're learning a language in school for a few years, and then you face a native speaker and you're still not able to communicate, because yes, you could conjugate all tenses perfectly, but what are you going to do if you don't know any other words to use with it? And another thing is that the teacher really shapes the attitude towards a language. And if you get a good teacher, lucky, because as with any subject, I guess, but with languages as well, you will start enjoying it a lot more if the material is explained in an interesting way, if the activities you do are fun and interactive and whatever works best for your language learning. But then if you get a teacher that's not all of that, and if you hate class, if you hate the activities, if you feel like it's all pointless, you will start disliking the actual language as well, because you associate it with the negative aspects of the class. And this, of course, it isn't good. It isn't good. And once again, depending on the teacher and on the school you go to, everyone is taught at the same level. In Ireland, I'll use it as an example. For exam subjects, you're split into higher level and ordinary level. And all subjects except of English, Maths, and Irish stay in the same class. So they're not split. So for French, which was the language I was doing in school, higher and ordinary level students were all in the same class, learning the same material, doing the same activities, everything, except that the exam paper was different. So higher level students had to do more writing, ordinary level had more options, I think, or something like that. But when everyone is taught at the same level, this also doesn't work, because the ones who progress faster have to wait for the ones who have to catch up. And in this situation, not many people benefit, because those who wait miss out on their language learning. Those who try to catch up stress and just cram the material just for the sake of not falling behind. So these approaches don't really work. And these approaches, like another example is using the same textbook for everyone. You know, different people have different study methods and different order of topics they usually learn and things like that. So this kind of classroom setting could become quite negative, and you will unwillingly start to associate that with the language that you're learning, and you will start hating the language. Well, at least that's how it was with me. Maybe some people are better at, splitting class from language. That being said, there are, of course, good aspects about schools. I'm not just hating on them here. Some people find it better to have a structured curriculum to study with. Some people prefer the textbook approach, and it works well. For some people, maybe learning grammar with the teacher is more important, because they could learn the vocabulary themselves and go beyond the vocabulary lists that the teacher gives. So it really depends, but in my opinion, people usually need an individual approach, and this is something that a class is not always able to offer. Now I'll share my story. Well, my story number one is about French. At the start, and by the start, I mean the start of secondary school, because that's when I started learning the language, everything went well. Everything went great. I had very good teachers in school. So the way it went for me was, in first year, I had one teacher. For the next 3 years, I had another one, also good. And then for the last 2 years, I had the first one again. So in that sense, they didn't realize it, but they worked like a good team to get my French going, because I got a good base. Then I spent 3 years building vocabulary and knowledge, and then I returned to, polish off my knowledge, basically. And of course, when I was in third year, I got a chance to travel to France and actually try speaking French to people. Like, the usual things that people learn in any class. asking for directions, ordering food, buying tickets to the museum was my little personal achievement. Um, so everything was good in school with my French. Then in the final year, the pandemic hit, and the lockdown started around the middle of March. And when everyone switched to online learning, I was still doing okay. Like at that point, I was still all right. But then exams got cancelled. And when the final exams got cancelled, that was when I kind of gave up because of the pandemic, I started looking into more courses. I started doubting my plan that I had of doing business in French. But I had that plan since I was about 12. So all of a sudden, I was like, okay, I had that same plan in my head, but there are so many other options. So in a few months before university starting, I started looking into those options and thinking about other languages and studying abroad, because that was also a time I really wanted to leave Ireland. So all of that kind of didn't create a very good environment for learning French. So I stopped it, and I got to the point where I was just annoyed at even hearing the language. And that was my first burnout with French. So I did not touch it for all summer. I got into university, into a French course, of course. And once I started, as you can see from my little chart, things started improving because I had a great lecturer. And as we all remember, teachers influence the attitude. The class was taught through French. The activities were very creative. Like I had to create comic strips in French, recorded a cooking video as well. So I got fun ways of applying the language, and I got more interested in it again. And at least I could, survive listening to the language without, getting annoyed. Um, After first year, though, things went a bit downhill, and they kind of still are now, to be honest, because French class in uni got a lot more serious, I guess. I don't get the same enjoyment out of it anymore because most of the topics that we do, like last semester, we did a lot on the economy, different like social issues like unemployment, women's rights, not the most light-hearted topics to learn a language with. So I started focusing a bit more on Italian instead because that's what I enjoy more. But I don't stress about it, not yet anyway, because as you can see, I have a hope for a brighter future, which is called moving to France, because I am moving at the end of August this year. And right now, I don't stress about not studying French. Just, submit my homework and move on. Because once I'm in France, French will pretty much learn itself. At least that's the optimistic view that I have, because the language will be more alive and I'll be surrounded by obviously French people, and I'll have to use it and study in it and do cultural activities in it and everything. So I'm hoping that things will come back to be as positive as they were before, if not better. That's the forecast. The next story is actually mirroring the first one a bit. So it didn't start off too well, but then it got better. So once again, start of school. We did Irish in primary school, but I won't count that because it wasn't anything serious. So we'll start with secondary school once again. The first 3 years were all right. The teachers were okay. The activities were fine. The grades were okay. It was never my favorite at that point, but it was not the worst. The only thing that I never, at that age, I never considered Irish a real language. For me, it was just a school subject, attend class, do homework, write the exam, done, which you could guess that is not a very good approach to have. But it went okay. In fourth year, my Irish tragedy happened, the lowest point of my Irish language journey. As I mentioned before, for Irish, the higher and ordinary level classes are split. But because there are a lot of people, they're split into four. So two ordinary, two higher. And for literally no reason, the two higher ones are like just high and the cooler higher level. Although in terms of grades and exams, it's all the same. It's just a matter of status, I guess. I don't even know. But I got moved from second higher to higher. And you'd think that I'd be happy about it. But the teacher that the class had was not the best. I've no complaints about her as a person because we got on super well. She's super nice and everything. But the teaching methods were what destroyed me in fourth year. And apart from counting Irish as nothing but a school subject, it got worse because it became a school subject that I don't like. So it was even harder to start looking at Irish as an actual language. And then fifth year came, which, as you see, is a huge jump. And as you probably may guess, this jump happened because we changed teacher. I still do not know the reason for that. Gossip said that too many people complained about the other one. I didn't really know, but I didn't really mind either. So the teacher we had in fifth year, super interesting, super lively, interactive, explaining things well. I suddenly started understanding a lot of things I didn't understand before about the language. And she would always speak in Irish. And obviously, you'd have to answer in Irish. So you were kind of forced to speak. And this was the year when everything just clicked in my head. Because for me, thanks to this teacher, Irish became a language. And it was a very crucial moment in my language journey. I started doing stuff outside of class. I started studying more to bring up my level because in the higher class, a lot of the people that were there went to Irish primary school, so they were fluent, whereas I had to kind of keep up with them. And I started reading a lot more and enjoying the language, found a lot of YouTube material. And by a lot, if you compare it to mainstream languages, it's barely anything. But the past maybe 2 years, there's a lot more content available in Irish, which is actually great. So then after I graduated from school, I decided that I will continue maintaining Irish, that I don't want to drop it, which a lot of people in Ireland do. They, do their exams and just forget that Irish even exists and just move on. I did not want this to happen because if you follow me on my Instagram, you will see that I put a lot of effort into promoting the Irish language. And I think at some point I even made a few foreign people start learning it. I don't know if they still do, but I appreciate the effort. So Irish became quite important. And although I took a few months of a break from it because last semester in university was very busy and now I'm on work placement, I am starting to get back into it again. For example, this week I've finally picked up the book that I was reading again, which It's the first book of Harry Potter. Ironically, the only book in the series that's translated into Irish. So when I finish that, I don't know what I'll do. So I'm super happy that this transformation of the mindset happened in fifth year. I wish it happened earlier, but better late than never, I guess. So here you saw two different stories that were going on pretty much at the same time. And now we've talked about all the problems, all the negativity that could affect your attitude towards the language, all of this. But what could you actually do to, fix that? First thing that I'll recommend is to make the language less academic, because as you have noticed in my Irish story, the moment I stopped counting it as just a thing I have to do for school, it became a lot more enjoyable and a lot easier. And you could tie it in with your hobbies, for example. Let's say you enjoy working out. You could find workout videos from other countries and follow along in your target language. Or if you like art, you could find tutorials or manuals, handbooks, whatever, in the target language. So if you use the language to do something you already love doing, you'll enjoy it even more. And you won't have this negative association going on, because if you like the language, even if you don't, love it yet, or if you're going from the burnt out condition or anything, but you're doing something that you really, really, really like, then of course it will be super useful, because you'll be doing what you love. I feel like I've repeated myself like 5 times. Apologies. You could make it less of a routine, and also spice up your resources. So, as I mentioned earlier, the interesting content is very important. And if, for example, you don't tie it in with your hobbies, you could find something that you enjoy in the language, be it a podcast, maybe a certain radio, maybe a certain YouTuber, something to read. Like, of course, different people enjoy different things. Like, I could speak for myself. I don't really like podcasts. I can't concentrate on them. But I watch YouTube videos, and both are good listening comprehension. They're equally good. So it just depends on what you find more enjoyable. And in terms of the routine, give yourself the freedom to be more flexible. Because if you say that, okay, I will be doing 2 hours of this language every Monday and Thursday, and that's it. And then if you, on a Wednesday, for example, if you feel like learning that language, you put that constraint on yourself that, no, I said I'm doing it on Mondays and Thursdays. I can't do this now. Or if you're learning a few languages at the same time, if you start thinking that, oh my God, for the third day in a row, I'm doing Irish, but French is just lying around there, feeling neglected. I need to do a bit of it instead and force myself, because they should be equal. Allow yourself the freedom to just be more flexible. If you feel like for 3 lessons in a row, you want to do one language more than the other, go for it. If you want to change your schedule every week, go for it. If you want to not have a schedule, go for it. So in this way, you will feel less stressed about it. And when you have this variety of resources and this less and you have less of a routine, then the language will be more alive. You will feel less like a robot being like, okay, 1 hour every day, that's it, let's go. And it will start becoming more real for you. If you have the chance to travel to the country where your target language is spoken, then my advice is obvious, and then travel to that country. I understand that for some people, finding the time or the money is difficult. Or, of course, if you live in the USA, for example, and you study Greek, it's not really a distance that you could be traveling very often. So, if possible, if the country or your target language is spoken is close to you, it's definitely something I recommend. You can go as far as falling in love with someone from that country, and then you love the person, then you start loving the language. But because that's not something you can control, I won't be including it in my advice. At least I think you can't control it anyway. Language exchange is another important thing, because remember what I said about not having anyone to talk to and then feeling that it's pointless because nobody from your friends speak that language. So there are many apps like Interpals, HelloTalk, Tandem, probably some more at this point, where you could find native speakers of your language. It does take some effort to find them, though, because these apps have never really worked out well for me. I would have a few conversations with someone and then stop. But there are one or two people that I know for about 3 years at this point. So you could find people to talk to that you actually have, many points in common and you have what to talk about. And it doesn't have to be the traditional type of exchange either, which is, every Saturday at 10 in the morning, we meet for a 1 hour Zoom. Be more flexible, give yourself the freedom. If you want to call at different times, go for it. Like if you want to just send voice messages to each other in your target language, or if you want to just do exchange over text, that could also work. It Instead of a native speaker, it could be someone who's also learning the language, maybe at the same level as you. And then in that way, both of you benefit from it. It doesn't really have to be super big, even like I have a friend who speaks a lot of languages and is also part of the study ground community, which is how we met. And sometimes I send the friends a meme in Italian, for example, and then they respond with a few messages in Italian, and then we could switch back to English, or another time we could go to French. So even if you have those little short interactions, it's still beneficial, because many people think that, oh, unless it's 30 minutes or 1 hour session, like a proper class, I don't count this. But really, there are probably many things that you do that count already, be it looking through social media, texting your friends, sending memes in a language, and it all adds up. So you don't have to worry that, oh, I need to schedule this call every week for 5 hours, whatever. And this is super important because, as I said, humans love socializing most of the time. And another big thing is attending language events like this. You get to meet like-minded people, which is always great, because even if you don't end up talking, it's a source of inspiration. Like even the language conference that I'm attending every year since 2019, every year, that's like my main boost of motivation, is seeing other people talk about the languages that they speak, their native languages, their target languages, sharing resources, and just being very helpful and supportive. And this definitely will help you a lot. Finally, if nothing works, or if you've been, stuck in the intermediate plateau, if you've been burned out, anything, remember that it's okay to take a break. Nobody will come murder you for it, except the Duolingo owl. But what are the chances, taking a break is fine. I realized when preparing for this that I took a break from all my languages at some point. Not at the same time, though, because that would have been a bit sad. But at different points, I've stopped. Taking my French as an example, when I was burnt out, I stopped for the summer. For Irish, I'm just returning from a break now. With the Greek, I started learning it last year, did a bit, and then because of lack of resources and then lack of time, and it just didn't go, took a break, hopefully resuming this month as well. And what was the last one? Italian. Also, I started learning it during the first lockdown. Did it the whole summer that I was actively ignoring French. And then when university started in September, I dropped the language until Italy won Eurovision in May. And then I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to return with energy, with love, with everything. So taking a break is normal. It doesn't even have to be as long as a few months. It could be a bit problematic if it's a language you have to do for school or university, and that you have classes and homework to do, because of course you can't just announce that, oh, okay, I'm taking a break from the language and I'm not doing any homework for the next 4 weeks. Nobody will thank you for that, even yourself. But it could be something as small as a weekend, for example, or maybe if you study a language every day, even a day off could act as a chance to recharge. So if you need a break, don't feel like you have to punish yourself for it, or don't feel like anyone else other than the Duolingo owl will punish you. This really is my last piece of advice. If you're thinking what is the most important to take away from this, it's probably the routine. So give yourself more flexibility and freedom, and making the language seem more alive by, interacting and adding some variations to your resources and methods. And that it's okay to take a break, always. So thanks a lot for listening. You can get in touch through my Instagram, which you see on screen, and it's a safe space for everyone. You could, if you want to discuss this presentation, you can message me. If you want to discuss anything else about languages, anything else about study, about anything at all, you could approach me, no problem. And if you want me to send you the slides or anything, no problem at all. And here's also the Instagram of the Polyglot Youth Project, which also shares a lot of good advice, fun games, and a very supportive and friendly community. The application process for them is open at the moment, if I'm not wrong. So you can check out the Instagram to see the languages that are offered and more details about the dates and how the cycles go and things like that. So thanks again for listening, and time for the Q&A.